Lizzy Palmer, and this is a Lunar Poetry podcast short. Today I'm joined by my good friend Chip, aka the Brothers Grimm, and we are coming to you from the All Stars boxing gym on Harrow Road, hence the manly, energetic background noise you might be hearing.
And womanly.
Right, so hi Chip.
Hello, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm knackered actually. I've had a very tough morning training and coaching, and it's all good. It's all good.
Well, it'd be good for our listeners to know that even tough boxers like to talk about poetry sometimes too.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So, if it's all right with you, by way of a proper introduction, we'll start with a poem.
Okay, I'm going to do something that's relatively new, but I think will serve the purpose, and it's called I Spy. Can't do semiotics, doesn't read the signs, not diagnosed, not neurotypical, just one of those who lives between the lines, penned in the margins, out in the cold sweat, someone you dreamt of, no one you met, well versed in tradecraft, dead letters dropped, has gone the distance, never been stopped at the border, under control, sleeping together, ratty and mole. Twice is coincidence, 3 times a plot, once is an accident, except that it's not that easy. Behaviours are learned at deep extra cover, an agent is turned.
Wonderful, thank you. So my first question is, why poetry?
My first answer is why not, which is trite, and I've heard other people say it. But you know, nowadays with sort of short attention spans, something short, crafted, precise, that's got to work, isn't it? You know, it should be more accessible. Second answer is because I'm good at it. I think we all like to do things that we're good at, and I need some sort of affirmation as much as the next person, if not more. So yeah, I think it's something that I'm good at and I like doing it. You know, the craft of it pleases me. And the third reason I think is because there's a short distance from plot to plate. I'm not sure that I advise it, but you can be working on something over the weekend and then, you know, stick it up on Facebook, or, you know, wander down to the Poetry Cafe on Tuesday and to Poetry Unplugged and get it out there and see what people think of it. And there's no other artistic expression that I can think of that has that same kind of effect. You know, if you're writing, I've, you know, fooled around with writing for the stage and writing short stories and that sort of stuff. I've thought about writing novels. But it's just, you know, it just takes so long to get anything done. You know, you can be doing stuff and nobody ever sees it. The thing about poems is, you know, once you finish them, you can get them out there and do things with them, you know.
So, speaking of getting it out there, so to speak, how often do you read your poetry in public?
Perhaps not as often as I should. You know, almost going back to the sort of the first question about why poetry. You know, it's always seemed to me, it seemed that poetry's always been somewhere around in my life. From a kid, you know, my mum and dad somehow managed to get poetry into me, and then you know, I've been in and around poetry for a long time. I don't, and how I met somebody through boxing about 15 years ago, a guy called Joe Asser. Actually the bloke who wrote the film that's been very well received, Starred Up. And he is a very good poet. He's concentrating on writing film scripts now. But I met him here. I was teaching him, coaching him here, and he was talking about doing poetry work. And although I'd known people who'd done live poetry back in the 1980s, who I'm in touch with again now, it had completely dropped off my radar. Yeah. And he said, oh, you should come along, because I expressed interest. And I went along and I thought, well, I can do at least as well as that. But I've never got out of the loop of, it's not something that I do professionally. It's something that I do. It's part of my life, and a big part of it. And I want it to go well. But it's only one aspect of me and my life. So I don't do a lot of hustling around for work. So to answer the question directly, I will go out and do gigs. And I'll go out and do open mics and that sort of stuff. But I don't do a lot of hustling for work. So I might do maybe a couple of dozen, 25 to 30 live events in a year. But there's some, if I'm invited to do a feature, I'll definitely go. If I've got some new stuff, I'll probably go down to Unplugged, because I know Niall O'Sullivan quite well. I know he's going to stick me on just to try out new stuff. Or if there's people that I know are gigging that I like, I'll go along to that. But I can't be bothered to just trail around the place looking for open mics and sweet talking people. That's just not me.
Yeah. And have you had anything published?
I get bits and pieces published in little magazines and stuff. It's interesting, going back that question about how you get your poetry out there. I'm not sure just getting stuff published is the only way. As I say, I like doing live work. I think I'm good at it. But again, I've got into a habit now of even if I'm happy with a poem, sticking it up as a note on Facebook with an image of some kind. And occasionally, about once a year, my brother-in-law, who's a visual artist, Mark Welland, he and I do some work where we either do a short film or we'll do some work incorporating visual stuff and get it out there. And then there's the getting published thing. And I don't really submit work anywhere. The one place I will send stuff, I'm a big fan of Rising. I'm an old mate of Tim Wells from back in the day. I really like the whole ethic of that. But I had poems published in Pen Pusher, Counterculture, South Bank Poetry, which I like. They published 3 of my American poems on the Bounce, which is good. And if a night is doing, I know Janice and Donald down in Guildford did an anthology of poets that they'd had down there, and I put some stuff in for that. And I know there's Until the Light Goes Out anthology coming. I'll put some in for that. But if I'm asked to do something, I'll let people have it. But I'm not going to send unsolicited stuff all around the place. I'm just not going to do it.
Would you say you prefer a more direct expression then?
At risk of making a pun at my own expense, I have a bit of an attitude towards it, a bit of a chip on my shoulder about the page stage stuff. I think there's a danger that if you're known as being good live, people take the attitude, well, it can't be all that much written down then. Whereas I actually work really, really hard to make sure it works in both, really, really work at it and craft it to make sure that it works on the page and on the stage. I don't think the two things are mutually exclusive. I think too often, I'm not going to say anything negative at all. I'm going to be positive, but too often poetry's badly presented, or at least quite without much imagination. To be fair, if I'm hoping that people are going to come out and someone will spend their time and money listening to me dropping my poems, then the least I can do is to do something to put it over to them. By the same token, I know that there are some people who are great live and and the content isn't all that. There are some people who, it looks great on paper, but live they're pretty dull. I don't see why that should be the case. I think everybody has it in them to write good stuff and to actually present it well. So
great. Well, we'll have another poem then, please.
Okay. Let me do something that first one wasn't entirely typical. I've got a bit of a reputation as a political poet. I can't think why. I just write stuff, and sometimes it comes out political. But there is an election coming around the corner, and I'll do this because this is a bit of a signature piece, and that's kind of something that people would know me by. And it's about the current coalition government. It's called a class act. It's the thin veneer that's so insulting, as if we should be grateful that they feel the need to lie at all. Decisions have been taken, still they are consulting their key stakeholders, the ones that fall between the quite unloved, unlucky, and the unfortunate but undeserving poor. They'll play no real part in the big debate. Why do the haves need so much more to motivate them whilst the have-nots apparently need so much less? How did we get ourselves into this sorry state, and can we trust the ones who promised to extract us from this mess? It seems for me to be one fundamental, fatal flaw, a massive fault line in their master plan. They want it both ways. Want to get well in the good times and the bad. They want you with your head down, working for the man. They want to stop you spotting you've been had. Whilst those who want for nothing, they want more. So now with government by clever knotting of the old school tie, and they'll do very nicely thank you out of boom and bust. So ask yourself, what does this signify? Is it a nasty accident or a betrayal of trust? The fact is, this is something that we've seen before. This is a class act. That's what this is. This is war.
Wonderful, thank you.
I make myself laugh. I get quite into that.
No, it's great.
I get quite into it. Focus, Chip, focus.
My next question is about how you critique your own work. And whether or not you have any specific methods for doing that. So I know you said already you don't purposely go out and seek out, open mic audiences all that much. But do you look for feedback from audiences at all, or are there certain people you share your writing with?
That's really interesting. I think this is the most difficult question. I don't really. I'm an arrogant so-and-so. I am pretty certain that what I'm writing is good, and I didn't get into it. About 15 years ago, I sort of started into this idea of the Brothers Grimm as a poetry project, as it were. That sounds a bit hyphen, but I'm gonna write some poetry for a few years to see how that goes. And I think I could present it well. I think I've got some things to say, but I never got into it in order to be liked or published like any writer. I'd quite like to have a slim volume or a couple of slim volumes.
Yeah.
I think my work stands up. I think I've got some things to say, but I absolutely understand that I'd need to put more work in, really. But in terms of critiquing my stuff, there's people whose opinions I really respect. And I've got some good friends in poetry, and sometimes those people will give me some good feedback, but I don't really go looking for feedback. And it's interesting, everybody likes it. If somebody comes up to you and says, I really liked your stuff, that really makes me happy.
Yeah.
And I'm pleased about it, and I like to engage people in conversation. But we were talking before we turn the mic on, what level of danger you're in. Somebody I like asking me about poetry, we could be talking for hours and hours and hours. And I think we've been talking around some set questions, and to be fair, I think we've probably had better conversations. Although those questions are good questions, I've been answering the questions and you've been asking, and we've had better conversations about poetry. In those conversations, I'll always say I don't really give a damn what people think about it, as long as I'm reasonably happy with it. I'm my own harshest critic.
Yeah.
Sometimes I do gigs and I just think that was just rubbish, Chip. It was rubbish. But particularly if you're a feature, you should be working on how does your set hang together.
Yeah.
What you should be rehearsing, what you're going to say in between, linking the poems, all that sort of stuff. In order to make it work. It was interesting. My brother-in-law went down to look at some paintings in Eastbourne, and we were talking about there were two shows there. One was John Virtue and another very good guy, his name I can't remember. But both those shows had a theme, and if you're doing a set, you're just pulling poems out at random doesn't work for me. You should try and make it hang together as a whole, as you should do with collections, I think. But to answer the question, no, I don't really do that. Although positive feedback is always welcome, and to be fair, on occasion I've had some negative feedback. I think Niall O'Sullivan told me that I did a feature for him down at the Poetry Cafe, and he got a letter of complaint saying we don't want this sort of stuff, it's really negative, it's the poetry of the clenched fist. And I said, Niall, have you got that letter? Because I want to frame it.
Use it in your publicity.
Absolutely. But the other thing I'd say is I think sometimes it's a bit difficult because the way I am on stage for people to approach me. I don't think I'm the most approachable individual. I'm a lovely cuddly bunny really, but sometimes I don't actually come across like that.
Yeah, oh we know that. On that note, how would you like to see your writing progress?
It's a good question. I'm not altogether certain. I will, as I say, if I'm at a gig and somebody comes up and says I really like that, I've got a journal or a magazine or something, could you send me some stuff? I will, absolutely. I have spoken to publishers about having a pamphlet or a book and sent some stuff, and to now I haven't really got a bite on that, and I don't really mind. I just, I'm in it for the long run. The long run being one of my things. I'm not going to get disheartened or disillusioned with the work. It's just, I can do it in a sustainable way. If I'm doing a couple of gigs a month, that's great. If I'm getting a few things published here or there, that's great. If I get something larger published, that's great too. You find, the work that you're writing changes subtly over time. I just like to keep writing, keep being able to do gigs with good people, having good conversations with people. It's one or two, so I do a little bit of work with my brother-in-law on mixing visual art and poetry, and I've done a little bit of work in studio with producers that I'm not entirely happy with. But if I had unlimited time and unlimited funds, I've got some ideas about bringing different, bringing visual art and some music and some words together. But that's not my primary focus. My primary focus is I'm a poet.
Yeah.
That's what I do, and if I can do some mixed media work with people who I connect with, I would do that as well. But it's just getting the opportunity, the time, and the money to put it all together. Of
course. So before we get on to our final two questions, can we have a third and final poem?
Yeah, okay. This one's called Not Half Empty, Drained. The lives of others in the Special Demonstration Unit come together for a money shot. She moans, then he ejaculates. When they cry cut, That's all we've got. Regardless of their lordship's verdict, we know exactly when we're being screwed. Some say we're stuck with it. We're not. Just super glued. Lectures on revolution from some hairy lecture make us yawn. Switch off or back to Strictly, else to online porn. Tune out the commentary on privilege, on gender, race, on intersectionality, till someone asks, whatever happened to the working class? Then sigh, bend over, hold your ankles, take it up with your MP.
Thank you. So what?
You've heard that poem before.
I love it. It's my favourite.
you know that false ending. I did a gig the other day, and like people just stared at me, and I thought, oh no, never mind.
What would you say have been the main influences over your development as a writer and performer?
That is a really difficult question to answer without sounding like a complete prick. It really is. A long list of people. Honestly, that's almost impossible. Almost impossible to answer. I've been around for a while, you know, and an awful lot of things have influenced me. Not just poetry, but you know, going back to when I was a kid, and mum and dad sort of feeding me a bit of Lewis Carroll, T.S. Eliot, a bit of Kipling, to sort of as a young fella listening to music, being into sort of lyric heavy songs, you know. Obviously, you know, I was a teenager and punk rock came along with that, you know, opened a whole lot of stuff out. You know, obviously people like Johnny Clark, you know, that sort of accessibility of it. But, you know, we all kinds of people. The singer-songwriters, you know, there's a line. Sort of Woody Guthrie, Bob Dylan, Billy Bragg, Weller, Costello. I don't know whether that list has run out a little bit now. You know, I listen to a lot of hip hop. I go to a lot of theatre. I'm a big Shakespeare fan. You know, if museums and galleries set me off on stuff. Reading the newspaper, shouting at the Today programme in the morning. You know, my oldest friend in poetry, I suppose, is Tim Wells. And he and I often say, you know, young poets come and ask, you know, where do you get an idea? You know, how do you work out what to write about? It's like sitting on buses, you know, sitting at the bar, listening to conversations, what people say, picking up on a phrase. I've got a poem that starts, he dropped some banging tunes, yeah. And that was a phrase I heard on the bus. It's like, I've got to put that in a poem. And it's a start to, you know, a good poem. And you just overhear things. Influences, you know, what we were talking about, you know, how black music has evolved sort of from reggae toasting through into hip hop, and I mean, you know, Gil Scott-Heron. When I first heard Gil Scott-Heron or Linton Kwesi Johnson, people like that was a shock. And you know, really, I'm talking about in the 1970s. It was like, there are different ways of doing the same thing, but there are different ways of doing it. But that happens across the piece. You know, already I've dropped some names there. I didn't mean to do that. But there's a whole lot of stuff out there.
Yeah, obviously you've got quite a huge range of influences. So for the final question, what would you recommend to our listeners to go out and see, read, or watch? It doesn't have to be poetry related, just anything you've enjoyed.
Right. Okay. Well, I'd recommend people get down to Eastbourne and have a look at this John Virtue exhibition of paintings. That's not too bad. Talking about Tim Rolls again, he's doing a series of gigs around ranting poetry, the Stand Up and Spit series this summer. it wouldn't be me talking about poetry if I didn't mention Helen Malt, who I think is, you know, the brightest prospect out there. Anything she's doing, including her blog Poetry on the Brain, is worth having a listen to. I'd watch out for Ashley Treasure Theophane when he becomes world champion at light welterweight later this year. Shout out to Ash. You know, get out and experience things. Yeah, or just sit in your room and scribble. You know, yeah, just keep your eyes peeled for interesting stuff, and try and be one of the people that's involved in it.
Yeah, good advice. Well, thanks very much, Chip.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Lunar Poetry Podcast Short. Thanks very much.